The air is thick, a palpable medium tasting of ferric dust and the sharp, sterile bite of ozone. The time is 2:41:16 a.m., Zandian local time. For the man designated Lev, lying prone in the fine, cloying red dust of the Ubari Valley. Time is no longer a linear progression of minutes, but a staccato rhythm of biological functions. His heart rate, monitored by subcutaneous sensors and relayed in encrypted microbursts, is 110 beats per minute. This is 15 beats above his mission baseline of 95, a deviation flagged as unacceptable in his pre-mission conditioning profile. Elevated heart rate compromises fine motor control and accelerates cognitive fatigue. He initiates a controlled 4-second box breathing cycle. Inhale, hold, exhale, hold. The sound of his exhalation, filtered through a carbon dioxide scrubber in his mask, is a faint hiss, entirely absorbed by the ambient hum of the high-voltage perimeter fence. The fence stands 6 inches from his face, a T8800 capacitor discharge system capable of delivering a non-lethal but incapacitating 10,000-volt shock, followed by a lethal 7-amp current if contact is maintained for more than 2 seconds. It marks the outer perimeter of the Ubari Valley Research Facility. Officially, a joint Zandian-Chinese geological survey station. Unofficially, the reason Lev's heart rate is elevated. He has just activated the first stage of the deception protocol, codenamed Whisper. A low, mournful sound, barely audible to the unaided human ear, has emanated from a small, rock-shaped speaker he planted 412 meters to the north-northeast. The sound is a complex audio file engineered over 3 months in a Mossad acoustics lab in Tel Aviv. It is designed to mimic a local Dazanak folk legend, the cry of a grieving spirit known as the Moro. Critically, it is layered with an infrasound carrier wave at 18.9 Hertz. This specific frequency, just below the threshold of human hearing, is known to vibrate the human eyeball, creating visual distortions at the edge of vision, and to stimulate the vestibular system in the inner ear, inducing a subtle but persistent feeling of vertigo and unease. The effect is immediate and quantifiable. Through his panoramic night vision optics, a GPNVG-18 model with custom-tuned white phosphor tubes, Lev observes 2 guards at Watchtower 3 stir. Guard 1, identified from 14 days of observation as Omar, makes a traditional Dazanak sign of warding, a quick gesture against his chest. Guard 2, Basim, speaks into his handheld radio. The response is a burst of white noise. This is a component of the deception. For the next 90 seconds, local UHF and VHF communications within a 1.5-kilometer radius are being selectively jammed by a ground-based repeater Lev emplaced 2 nights prior. The jamming is not a blanket denial of service, which would be immediately obvious and trigger an alert protocol. Instead, it introduces targeted packet loss and signal degradation, mimicking the poor reception common in the valley's topography. The goal is tactical isolation, induced confusion, heightened fear. But the operational calculus has just been compromised. A third guard, a variable not present in the 336 hours of prior surveillance, emerges from the main barracks. This individual is different. He is not wearing the standard-issue digital desert camouflage of the Dazanak tribal militia. He wears the stark black fatigues and crimson beret of the Zandian Presidential Guard, an elite unit fiercely loyal to General Kamba. His insignia denotes the rank of captain. He carries an AK-103 assault rifle, a modernized 7.62x 39mm weapon, superior to the Dazanak's aging AK-47s. Most critically, he is not looking north towards the source of the sound. He is scanning the fence line methodically with his own thermal imager, a Pulsar Helion 2 XP50, a commercial model with military-grade resolution. The selective communications jamming won't fool his encrypted, frequency-hopping satellite phone. The ghost stories will not register on his professional threat matrix. He is an operator, not a superstitious militaman, and his methodical thermal sweep is bringing him directly towards Lev's concealed position. A new variable, a critical threat. Lev's mind, disciplined by years of training, processes the options not as choices, but as decision trees, each branch terminating in a calculated probability of mission success or failure. The mission is intelligence gathering, specifically the acquisition of a soil sample from a suspected radioactive waste dump site, and the placement of a sand grain micro camera inside the main research building. His orders are explicit. Remain undetected. Compromise is mission failure. Option 1. Maintain absolute stillness. The ghillie blanket covering him is not simple camouflage. It is a metamaterial optical thermal suppression system, MOTSS, a multi-layered sheet woven with thermoelectric Peltier elements. It actively samples the ambient ground temperature and radiates a matching thermal signature, making him invisible to thermal imagers. There is a 60% probability the Presidential Guard's scanner will register the area as thermally inert, consistent with the surrounding terrain. However, the 40% failure probability is non-trivial. It accounts for the scanner's resolution, the Guard's training, and the minute thermal leakage from Lev's own body heat. If detected, Lev will have less than 1 second to react before the Guard's AK-103, already shouldered, opens fire. Option 2. Activate Stage 2 of the deception, codenamed Shimmer. This is a visual effect, a network of 3 pre-positioned microprojectors that will create a shimmering, vaguely humanoid shape near the North Tower. It is designed as a major escalation, a powerful misdirection intended to draw all visual attention away from the fence line. But activating it now is premature. The main infiltration is scheduled for 04:00 a.m. during the Guard shift change. Using Shimmer now will burn the most effective tool in the psychological arsenal, hours ahead of schedule. It will guarantee a full facility lockdown and heightened security posture, complicating the primary objective to an extreme degree. The probability of successful infiltration post-lockdown drops to below 15%. Option 3. Neutralization. A small, pneumatically actuated injector is integrated into the index finger of his left glove. It contains 3 milliliters of a concentrated synthetic succinylcholine derivative. A single touch to exposed skin, the Guard's neck or hand, will induce rapid muscle paralysis, including the diaphragm, causing death by asphyxiation in under 4 seconds. It is completely silent. But it leaves a body that will be discovered at sunrise. A body of a Presidential Guard captain, found dead without a mark on him, will instantly elevate this from a security incident to a state-level investigation. It will turn a covert intelligence operation into a potential trigger for an international incident. The Guard is now 50 meters away. His thermal imager is sweeping back and forth in a disciplined arc. 40 meters. Lev can hear the distinct crunch of the Guard's boots on the gravel service path, a sound his acoustic sensor amplifies and analyzes. A choice must be made, not in minutes, now. The decision is not based on preference or instinct. It is a cold calculation of mission parameters against acceptable losses. The intelligence is the only priority. Capture is a non-negotiable failure state. An international incident is a strategic failure. A facility lockdown is a tactical obstacle, one that can potentially be overcome. He slides his thumb over the actuator for stage 2. 250 miles away, in a sterile, soundproofed room in Tel Aviv known as the Pit, a man named Yair watches a mosaic of data streams on a wall of screens. He sees a real-time satellite feed of the Ubari facility, a topographical map overlaid with Lev's position, and a biometric data feed showing Lev's heart rate, respiration, and core body temperature. He sees the faint, ethereal glow of the shimmer effect bloom into existence near the North Tower. He sees the thermal signatures of the 2 guards in the tower react, their body language betraying alarm. He sees the professional guard on the path. The black-clad captain stopped dead in his tracks, his head snapping towards the light, his thermal imager now pointed away from Lev. He has just witnessed his agent make a choice. He does not know if it is the right one, but he knows it was the logical one. He pours himself a glass of water from a carafe on his desk, his hand perfectly steady. For Yair, the operation, codenamed Phantom, has been running for 214 days. The real tension began months ago. The genesis of Operation Phantom was not a success, but a catastrophic failure. Not a Mossad failure, but a French one. On May 11th, 6 months prior, the DGSE, France's Foreign Intelligence Service, attempted its own infiltration of the Ubari facility. Their agent, Jean-Luc Martel, was a seasoned operator with a decade of experience in the Sahel. His insertion plan was based on human intelligence. A disgruntled deputy minister in the Zandian Ministry of Mines, cultivated over 2 years, who would add Martel's name to a UN geological inspection tour list. Martel's cover was that of a French mineralogist. The plan failed before it began. Martel and his contact were arrested by Zandia's Internal Security Service, the GSI, at a checkpoint on Highway A3, 20 miles from the facility. The GSI had not been lucky. They had intercepted a single, poorly encrypted SMS message from the deputy minister to his wife, complaining about having to work late to accommodate the arrogant Frenchman. Martel and the minister were publicly executed for espionage 2 days later, their bodies displayed in the capital as a warning. The French failure, though a tactical disaster, provided Mossad with 3 critical pieces of actionable intelligence. First, the Zandian GSI was far more competent and ruthless than Western intelligence agencies had assessed. Their counterintelligence capabilities, likely enhanced by Chinese technology and training, were not to be underestimated. Second, the Ubari facility was important enough for President Kamba's regime to kill for, publicly and brutally, risking international condemnation. This confirmed the facility's strategic value. Third, and most importantly, the DGSE's after-action report, discreetly shared with Mossad's liaison in Paris via a secure channel, contained a detailed appendix on the facility's guard force. They were not regular Zandian army soldiers. They were Dazanak tribesmen, a fierce militia from the country's northern mountains, bound by blood and tradition to President Kamba, who was himself of Dazanak heritage. The report noted their exceptional marksmanship and fieldcraft, but also mentioned, in a single line, their pronounced and exploitable adherence to pre-Islamic animist belief systems. This single phrase was flagged by a keyword algorithm in Mossad's research division. It was passed up the analytical chain until it landed on the desk of Yair. Yair was not a field agent. He was a planner, a strategist, a relic from a different era of intelligence work. At 58, his official title was Deputy Director of Special Projects, a deliberately vague designation for the man they called when brute force and high technology were not enough. His reputation was forged in operations like Diamond in 1966, where he masterminded the defection of an Iraqi MiG-21 pilot, delivering the Soviets' most advanced fighter jet to Israel. He did it not with money or threats, but by meticulously researching the pilot's psychology, identifying a deep-seated resentment at being passed over for promotion. Yair's defining trait was his belief that every system, a person, an organization, a nation, had a psychological vulnerability, a crack in its armor that could be exploited with the right pressure. He read the French report on the Dazanak guards and saw not a cultural footnote, but the blueprint for an attack vector. He pulled the personnel file of Miriam. Miriam was 32, a chemical engineer and electronics expert in the Neviot division, Mossad's advanced technology skunkworks. She was a prodigy. At 26, she had developed a new type of micro camera that could be embedded in the plaster of a wall, its microscopic lens disguised as a single grain of sand, drawing power from ambient radio waves. Her devices were currently listening to conversations in the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps headquarters in Tehran and the Presidential Palace in Damascus. Her file also noted a peculiar hobby. She was a performing member of the Israeli Society of Magicians. She lectured on the history of stage illusion, cognitive biases, and the principles of forced perspective and misdirection. Yair saw the connection. He then reviewed the files of the Kaidan unit, the tip of the spear, Mossad's elite division for direct action and special operations. He wasn't searching for the best marksman or the most physically imposing operator. He ran a search query based on specific psychological metrics: highest ratings in situational adaptability, improvisational problem solving, and low emotional reactivity under stress. The search returned a single name at the top of the list: Levy. Lev was 28. His operational record was sparse but spectacular. A flashback, crisp as a gunshot, surfaced in Yair's memory as he reviewed the file. Hamburg, 2 years prior. Operation Steel Weevil. The objective: sabotage a shipment of Iranian-bound P2 centrifuges, high-precision gas centrifuges essential for uranium enrichment. The centrifuges were disguised as industrial water purifiers, buried inside a single container amongst thousands at the vast Hamburg container terminal. A Kaidan assault team was on standby to destroy the container, a messy option that would cause an international incident. Lev proposed a different approach. He spent 3 days in Hamburg, not as a soldier, but as a ghost. He wore the grease-stained overalls of a dock worker, his face smudged with authentic grime he'd collected from a truck's exhaust pipe. He ate bratwurst from a street vendor, listening to the gossip of the crane operators, mapping the social network of the docks. He learned that the night shift supervisor, a man named Gunter, was a gambler, deep in debt to an Albanian loan shark, a fact Gunter tried to hide behind a veneer of blustering authority. He learned that the crane operator for Sector Gamma 9, Klaus, was exhausted, his wife having just given birth to twins, and that he chain-smoked a specific brand of cigarettes, Gauloise's Blondes, which he kept in his top pocket. Lev didn't approach either man. Instead, he targeted the system. He spent 18 hours observing the flow of paperwork in the terminal's logistics office, a cramped, fluorescent-lit room that smelled of stale coffee and desperation. He identified a moment of chaotic overlap during the 10 p.m. shift change. For 12 minutes, the outgoing and incoming clerks reconciled their logs, a window of confusion he could exploit. On the night of the operation, Lev walked into the logistics office carrying a box of donuts from a popular local bakery and 2 large coffees. He spoke flawless German with a believable Bavarian accent, a regional dialect that made him seem folksy and non-threatening to the native Hamburgers. He claimed to be a new driver for a local trucking firm, utterly confused about his pickup slip. As the clerks were distracted by the coffee and his seemingly idiotic questions, he deftly swapped a single bill of lading on the supervisor's desk with a forged one he had printed in his hotel room. The forgery was perfect. Down to the faint coffee stain in the upper right corner he'd replicated from a photograph taken with a pen camera. He had even aged the paper slightly using a weak tea solution. The new bill of lading rerouted container, ZIR 77B4, to a scrap metal yard in Gdansk, Poland, instead of the freighter bound for Bandar Abbas. The final piece of the puzzle was Klaus, the tired father. As Klaus was about to lift the target container, Liev, positioned a quarter-mile away on a pedestrian overpass, used a simple, off-the-shelf green laser pointer to flash a signal to a Confederate, a local asset who had been paid €200 to call Klaus's personal mobile phone at that exact second. Distracted by the call from his frantic wife about the crying twins, Klaus glanced at the new bill of lading without a second thought and loaded the container onto the train bound for Poland. The laser pointer wasn't just a signal. Its beam momentarily illuminated the new routing information on the forged document, drawing Klaus's sleep-deprived eyes to exactly what Lev wanted him to see. No explosions, no gunshots. A multi-billion-dollar nuclear program was delayed by 2 years because of a donut, a tired father, and a forged piece of paper. That was Lev. Yair had his team, a strategist, an illusionist, and an operator who could disappear in plain sight. The trigger for the mission came on August 3rd. Dr. Reza Asghari, a mid-level administrator in Iran's atomic energy organization, defected to the West by walking into the Turkish consulate in Erbil, Iraq. During his debriefing with a joint CIA MI6 team, he was rambling, often incoherent, showing signs of extreme psychological distress. But amidst his paranoia, he mentioned a code name, Project Chimera. He spoke of a clandestine partnership with an African nation, a plan to weaponize industrial radiological waste. He specifically mentioned the Ubari Valley. The intelligence was fragmented, uncorroborated. It was not enough to justify a military strike or to present to the UN Security Council. But for the director of Mossad, the mere possibility that a hostile regime, backed by Iranian technical expertise, could be developing a radiological dispersal device, a dirty bomb, within striking distance of key shipping lanes and regional allies, was an unacceptable existential threat. He called Yair into his office. The directive was simple. Find out what is in the Ubari facility. Get physical proof. Do it without being detected. Do it in a way that provides complete and total deniability. Yair presented his plan. He called it Operation Phantom. The director listened without interruption for 17 minutes. At the end, he was silent for a full minute, his gaze fixed on a map of the region. Then he said 2 words: "Don't fail." The geopolitical chessboard was dangerously unstable. The Republic of Zandia, for 50 years a stable pro-Western democracy, had fallen. 2 years ago, General Ismail Kamba, a charismatic and ruthless commander of the Zandian Army's 3rd Division, had seized power in a swift, bloody coup. He had promised stability, but delivered tyranny. He immediately realigned Zandia's foreign policy, expelling Western ambassadors, nationalizing foreign-owned mining operations, and welcoming in new allies: Iran, North Korea, and China. Zandia was rich in resources critical to the 21st century. coltan for electronics, and high-grade uranium ore. Under Kamba, those resources were no longer flowing west. They were flowing east. The intelligence community was in a state of controlled panic. Concurrent operations from rival agencies complicated the Zondian theater, turning it into a minefield of potential blue-on-blue conflicts. The CIA was running Operation Desert Owl, a persistent surveillance mission using a high-altitude stealth RQ-180 drone. The drone's powerful sensors could map thermal and electronic signatures across the valley. But its flight path was a compromise, designed to avoid Zondian and Chinese-supplied air defenses, meaning its resolution on the Ubari facility was often degraded. The risk was twofold. The CIA might spot Lev's thermal anomalies and, misidentifying them as hostile activity, report them to their Zondian contacts within the military remnant they were trying to cultivate for a counter-coup. Or worse. The Zondians' new Chinese-made YLC-8B anti-stealth radar might detect the RQ-180 and trigger a full facility lockdown, scrubbing Lev's mission. Simultaneously, the Russian SVR was running a clumsy human intelligence operation codenamed Coltan Kiss, attempting to bribe Zondia's Minister of Natural Resources. Their heavy-handed approach, monitored by Mossad signals intelligence, threatened to provoke a paranoid crackdown by General Kamba's GSI, a security sweep that would inevitably include the Ubari Valley. Yair's operation had to be a ghost, invisible not only to the enemy, but to allies and rivals alike. Satellite intelligence from the American NRO's Keyhole series satellites, shared with Israel, confirmed a surge of activity in the remote Ubari Valley. A new facility, built with startling speed by North Korean engineers and funded by Chinese loans. The official cover story was a joint Zondian-Chinese mining exploration project. But the infrastructure was inconsistent with mining. There were reinforced underground bunkers with triple redundant air filtration systems. There was a triple-layer perimeter fence, a surface-to-air missile battery installed on a nearby ridge, and a dedicated satellite uplink. Seismic sensors planted by Mossad's Unit 8200 on the Zondian border detected periodic, low-yield detonations from the valley. They were too small for nuclear tests, but their seismic signature was characteristic of the hydrodynamic testing used to perfect the explosive lenses required for an implosion-type nuclear or radiological device. The intelligence picture was terrifyingly incomplete. Every piece of data was ambiguous. The detonations could be for mining. The bunkers could be for equipment storage. The missiles could be for defending a valuable national asset. But taken together, they pointed towards a clandestine weapons program of the most dangerous kind. This was the problem Yair's team was created to solve. They spent a month in a red cell environment, a simulated command post, tearing apart every possible infiltration plan. They analyzed satellite imagery, thermal data, communications intercepts, and the DGSE's debriefing notes. They built a 150-scale model of the facility in a Negev desert warehouse. They profiled every known officer at the facility, down to the supply sergeants. And they kept coming back to the Dazanak guards. Joseph, Mossad's last remaining high-level asset inside Zondia, provided the crucial breakthrough. Joseph was not a soldier or a politician. He was a cultural anthropologist, a tenured professor at the University of Zondia before Kamba's purges. His recruitment had been a patient, delicate affair. Yair's case officer had made contact not with promises of money, but with a rare, first-edition copy of a book on Dazanak linguistics Joseph had been seeking for years. The real hook was the intelligence Mossad provided him. The location of the unmarked grave where Kamba's GSI had dumped the bodies of his wife and son. His loyalty to Mossad was born of a cold, patient desire for revenge. He had access to the National Archives. He provided Year's team with a detailed ethnography of the Dazanak people, their social structure, their traditions, their religious beliefs, and their fears. The Dazanak, Joseph explained via a secure dead drop, were animists. They believed the natural world was inhabited by spirits. And the Ubari Valley, in their folklore, was a place of immense spiritual power, the domain of a specific entity, the Moro. The Moro was a spirit of vengeance, said to guard the valley against intruders who would defile the land. It did not kill. It drove men mad. It appeared as a shimmering light, a heat haze in the cold desert night. Its voice was a whisper on the wind that could curdle a man's thoughts. Those who heard it were said to wander off into the desert, never to be seen again. To a Western military planner, this was meaningless superstition. To Yair, it was a weapon. The core of Operation Phantom was born from this intelligence. Mossad would not try to defeat the Dazanak guards. It would co-opt their belief system. It would not send a soldier to fight them. It would send a ghost. Miriam was tasked with building the ghost. She worked in her lab for 6 weeks straight, sleeping on a cot in her office. She approached the problem like a stage magician designing a grand illusion. Every effect had to have a purpose and be forensically untraceable. First, the Moro's whisper. It couldn't just be a recording. She designed a network of 12 small, self-contained audio units, camouflaged as local rocks. Each was solar-powered, with a lithium-ion battery that could last for 72 hours in complete darkness. Each unit contained a directional phased array speaker capable of projecting a narrow, focused beam of sound. The true innovation was the use of infrasound. Frequencies between 7 and 19 hertz, which Miriam programmed to fluctuate randomly within that range. This infrasound field would create a constant, subliminal sense of unease. On top of this, the units would project audible whispers. Joseph had provided a list of phrases from Dazanak folklore. Leave this place. The valley bleeds. Your heart is not your own. The whispers would be transmitted on a randomized schedule from different locations, controlled by Lev via a ruggedized tablet, making it impossible to pinpoint the source. Next, the Moro's shimmer, the visual component. Miriam rejected holograms as too power-intensive and easily detectable. Instead, she built a series of compact laser projectors. They didn't project a clear image. They projected a visual disturbance. A focused 532 nanometer laser beam passed through a series of oscillating lenses and an atmospheric diffusion grating would create a shimmering, vaguely humanoid shape when projected onto airborne dust or morning fog. The effect was ephemeral, lasting only seconds, designed to be seen out of the corner of the eye, a phenomenon that would prey on the guards' imaginations. Third, the bloodstone effect. Joseph's research told of a legend that the Moro's footsteps would cause the ground to bleed. Miriam created a binary chemical agent. Part A was a colorless, odorless liquid of potassium thiocyanate. Part B was an iron-3 chloride solution. When mixed and sprayed on soil or rock from an aerosolized canister, they were invisible. But upon contact with water, the morning dew, they would react to form iron thiocyanate, a compound with a deep, visceral red color of arterial blood. The effect would last for several hours before photolysis from sunlight caused it to break down and disappear, leaving no residue. Finally, for close quarters work, Miriam designed a suite of tools for localized kinetic events. These included silent, high-torque pneumatic rams that could swing doors open or slam them shut with terrifying force, and targeted microwave emitters that could rapidly heat metal objects like door handles or rifle barrels, causing them to expand and groan. Each piece of technology was a masterpiece of clandestine engineering, but they were just tools. The success of the mission depended on the artist who would wield them. Leave. His insertion into Zandia was the first test of the mission's unconventional nature. 3 weeks prior, at 35,000 feet over the lawless border region with Chad, the rear ramp of an unmarked C-130 Hercules lowered into the screaming wind. Lev, clad in a high-altitude infiltration suit, stood at the edge. Strapped to him was not just a parachute, but 150 pounds of Miriam's custom-built equipment in a hardened carbon fiber container. The Halo, high-altitude, low-opening jump, was necessary to evade Zandia's radar net. He leapt into the 40-degree air, plummeting towards the dark earth. For 4 minutes, he was a human projectile, guiding his fall with subtle shifts of his body. At 2,000 feet, he deployed his high-performance RA-1 parachute, a military-grade ram air canopy that allowed for a long, silent glide. He landed 18 miles from the facility, in a pre-selected wadi, a dry riverbed that offered cover from satellite observation. For the next 3 weeks, he lived like a desert predator, moving only at night, burying himself and his equipment during the day, using the MOTSS blanket to erase his thermal signature from the sun.